Most people think the biggest threat to the American economy is a recession. They hear the word recession and imagine job losses, falling stock prices, and businesses struggling to survive. But according to billionaire investor Ray Dalio, the real danger may be something much bigger. A recession is a normal part of the economic cycle. Economies slow down, recover, and continue moving forward. What worries Dalio is not a typical downturn. What worries him is the possibility that America could be entering a period of deep, structural problems that affect the entire financial system. If he is right, the next economic crisis may look very different from anything most people have experienced in their lifetimes. To understand this warning, we first need to understand how America reached this point. For decades, the United States has enjoyed enormous economic power. The U.S. dollar became the world's reserve currency. American financial markets attracted global investors, and the country was able to borrow money at relatively low costs. This system worked extremely well for a long time. However, over the years, government debt continued to grow. Every year, Washington spent more money than it collected in taxes. Instead of solving the problem, leaders often pushed it into the future. As a result, the national debt reached levels that would have seemed impossible only a few decades ago. Debt itself is not necessarily a problem. Individuals borrow money, businesses borrow money, and governments borrow money. The problem begins when debt grows faster than income. Imagine a family that keeps taking out new loans every year just to pay its old loans. Eventually, lenders become concerned. They start asking whether the family will ever be able to repay what it owes. According to Dalio, a similar challenge could eventually face the United States. As debt grows larger, interest payments become more expensive. More tax dollars are used to service debt instead of funding infrastructure, education, healthcare, or economic growth. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is the size of the numbers involved. Interest payments on government debt are rising rapidly. When interest rates stay high, the government must spend even more money simply to maintain existing obligations. This creates a cycle where borrowing leads to higher costs, which leads to more borrowing. Over time, the system becomes increasingly difficult to manage. Dalio argues that this is not just an economic issue. It is a political issue, a social issue, and potentially a geopolitical issue. Another reason Dalio is concerned is the growing divide within American society. Throughout history, major economic challenges often occur alongside periods of political polarization. When citizens become deeply divided, it becomes harder for governments to make difficult decisions. Instead of finding long-term solutions, politicians focus on short-term victories. Compromise becomes rare. Trust in institutions begins to decline. People start believing that the system no longer works for them. According to Dalio, these conditions have appeared repeatedly in history before major turning points. History plays a major role in Dalio's thinking. He has spent decades studying the rise and decline of great empires. He examined countries such as the Dutch Empire, the British Empire, and others that once dominated the world economy. In many cases, the pattern was surprisingly similar. Strong nations accumulated wealth and power. Over time, debt increased, internal conflicts grew, and economic competitiveness weakened. Eventually, a new global power emerged. Dalio does not claim that America is guaranteed to follow this path, but he believes that historical parallels are serious enough to deserve attention. One of the most important factors in this discussion is the U.S. dollar. Today, the dollar remains the dominant currency for international trade and global reserves. Countries around the world hold large amounts of dollars and U.S. Treasury bonds. This gives America significant advantages. It allows the government to borrow money more easily than most nations. But Dalio warns that reserve currency status is not permanent. History shows that no reserve currency lasts forever. If confidence in a currency begins to weaken, the consequences can be significant. Imagine a situation where foreign investors become less willing to buy U.S. debt. The government would need to find other buyers. One possible solution would be for the central bank to create money and purchase more government bonds. While this might provide temporary relief, it could also increase inflationary pressures. Inflation acts like a hidden tax. It reduces purchasing power and makes everyday goods more expensive. Families may find that their incomes no longer stretch as far as they once did. Inflation has already become a major concern in recent years. Many Americans experienced rising prices for food, housing, energy, and other necessities. Even when inflation slows, prices often remain much higher than before. This creates frustration among consumers. People feel like they are working harder while getting less in return. Dalio believes that debt and monetary policy are deeply connected to these challenges. When governments rely heavily on borrowing and money creation, inflation risks increase. Housing is another critical area. For many Americans, buying a home has become increasingly difficult. High mortgage rates combined with elevated home prices have pushed homeownership out of reach for millions of families. Housing has traditionally been one of the most important ways Americans build wealth. If younger generations cannot participate in that process, long-term inequality may worsen. Economic pressure builds slowly at first, but eventually it can reshape society in profound ways. The labor market also faces uncertainty. Technological advances, especially artificial intelligence, are changing the nature of work. Some jobs may disappear while others are created. Historically, innovation has often improved living standards, but transitions can be painful. Workers whose skills become less valuable may struggle to adapt. At the same time, companies that successfully use new technologies could become dramatically more productive. This creates winners and losers, increasing economic disparities. Dalio frequently emphasizes the importance of wealth gaps. When the difference between rich and poor becomes too large, social tensions can rise. People begin questioning whether economic opportunities are distributed fairly. Political movements gain momentum. Governments face increasing pressure to intervene. History shows that periods of extreme inequality often coincide with periods of instability. While inequality alone does not cause collapse, it can amplify other existing problems. Another challenge comes from global competition. The world is becoming increasingly multipolar. The United States remains extremely powerful, but other nations are growing stronger. Economic competition, technological competition, and geopolitical competition are intensifying. Trade disputes, sanctions, supply chain disruptions, and strategic rivalries all create uncertainty. Dalio believes these international pressures add another layer, complexity to America's economic future. So, what exactly does Dalio mean when he suggests something worse than a recession could happen? He is not necessarily predicting an immediate disaster. Instead, he is warning about the possibility of a broader systemic adjustment. A recession is usually temporary. The economy contracts, unemployment rises, and eventually recovery begins. A systemic challenge affects the underlying foundations of the economy itself. It can involve debt restructuring, currency pressures, political instability, and shifts in global power dynamics. The good news is that history also shows solutions are possible. Countries have faced difficult situations before and successfully adapted. The key is recognizing problems early and taking action before they become overwhelming. Responsible fiscal policies, investment in productivity, education, innovation, and infrastructure can strengthen long-term growth. Cooperation between political leaders can help restore confidence. Economic challenges are not destiny. They are obstacles that require effective management. Dalio often encourages people to think independently rather than react emotionally. Fear can lead to poor decisions. Panic selling, excessive risk-taking, and political extremism rarely solve underlying issues. Instead, He advocates understanding how economic cycles work. By studying history, individuals can better prepare for uncertainty. Knowledge becomes a form of protection. Investors can also learn valuable lessons from these warnings. Diversification remains important. Concentrating wealth in a single asset, industry, or country increases vulnerability. Markets can remain strong for years before major shifts occur, but eventually cycles change. Successful investing requires balancing optimism with realism. It means recognizing opportunities while also understanding risks. For ordinary Americans, the most important takeaway may be financial resilience, building savings, reducing unnecessary debt, developing valuable skills, and maintaining flexibility can help individuals navigate uncertain environments. Economic conditions will always fluctuate. The people who prepare in advance are often better positioned to handle unexpected challenges. Ultimately, Ray Dalio's warning is not simply about numbers on a government balance sheet. It is about the interaction of debt, politics, social tensions, technology, and global competition. When multiple pressures build at the same time, the risks become larger than any single problem. A recession may come and go, but structural challenges can reshape entire generations. Whether his predictions prove completely accurate remains to be seen. Economies are complex, and the future is never certain. However, history suggests that ignoring warning signs can be costly. The greatest financial risks often emerge gradually, hidden beneath years of apparent stability. By the time everyone notices them, the adjustment has already begun. And that is why Ray Dalio believes the real question is not whether America will face another recession. The real question is whether the nation can successfully navigate the deeper forces transforming the global economy before those forces create something far more significant than a recession.